The way the markets work, there's a lot of psychology there, as you know. But when I really took the plunge was right as the bubble was bursting. So
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Joel, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm excellent. I'm glad to be with you today.
Thank you for your time. I know you're super busy, taking some time out to share your story and experience with the audience. We very much appreciate it. Before we jump into about what you do, can you tell us a little bit about, where you're from? You're a little bit about, where you're growing up, high school, college, the 5-minute spiel.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I grew up in a Chicago suburb where I still live, and my father was a small business owner. And while I was growing up, his business flourished and blossomed, and he eventually became a victim of his own success. And when I was in high school, he lost it all. He lost everything. It was a very formative thing. So first of all, he evangelized for small business, which I'm also a huge fan of. It's perhaps the best workshop for personal development there is. It reveals everything about you, right?
Yes.
Strengths, weaknesses, disillusions, misconceptions, everything. And so as I was growing up, he introduced me to a lot of, in particular, one motivational speaker was Jim Rohn, who I just heard over and over again, who is the teacher of Anthony Robbins. That's probably his biggest current claim. And it wasn't just what to think and setting goals. That's important, but it's how to think, which is what I call it. But it's really mindset. It's optimism versus pessimism versus realism. It's all those things. And so when I was junior high into high school, I was one of those guys mowing lawns and washing and waxing cars, and one business venture after another. Going into college, I decided I was going to make custom computers from a dorm room. I was several years behind Michael Dell, who did it better, and beat me. There's one thing after another.
Yes.
My father's industry was construction, so I eventually tried my hand at some contracting operations, and the last one was an excavation company, which I later referred to as it was a great business to get out of. But it really gave me a lot of lessons. And what I learned along the way was I was trying things and they weren't working, and I'd get up and try something else and it wouldn't quite work. And, it was almost profitable, but the business model was kind of stillborn.
Right.
It was over before it began. And eventually in the late 90s, throughout the 90s, the stock market was rallying. I always had a mind for math and was always intrigued by the market, and decided I kind of waded into that. And by the late 90s, that was my full-time endeavor.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that was a good time to hit it.
It was,
good time to get out in early 20s, but
the way the markets work, there's a lot of psychology there, as you know. But when I really took the plunge was right as the bubble was bursting. So another great time to learn, but not really to.
There's lots of opportunities in those choppy waters. If you can learn in that world, then you can succeed anywhere.
When you start a business, the ultimate goal is to pick the fruit. What you don't realize is at some point you have to study the roots to get to that point. And that's where I was with the market. I was fortunate back then. I met a mentor who had been very successful in figuring the stock market out in his own way since the early 1960s. And I developed a personal relationship with him. He trained many professional and individual investors and money managers. But I was fortunate for a period to have direct access to him. And I think everyone on the surface always wants to know, what's the best stock? What's the next Apple or Tesla or something? But somehow I had the maturity back then, which kind of surprises me now, to ask not that question, but why does it work the way it works? What are the underpinnings and what drives the behavior? And therefore, when do you get in and when do you get out? So I was very fortunate. And however, that gentleman, Bill O'Neill, he was just marvelous, but some of the things he developed didn't work for me. And one of the things I learned from him, when things didn't work for him, he would say, don't go read a book on fish, go study fish, go directly to the data, go directly to the stock market and figure it out. And if you can, the ideal thing is find correlations and develop rules, you know, even if it's to get rid of your own bad habits. And so over a 19-year period, I've conducted more than 20,000 hours of research, often with colleagues or employees, but and really took his methodology to another level, at least in my opinion.
Right. I love that. Don't just go look at the fish. When I was in film school, I remember it was my first day in film school, and I dropped out that day. I was talking with one of my professors, and he's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to make movies. He's like, well, how many movies did you make? And I'm like, I've made 2. And he goes, well, you know how to make movies? Then just quit school and go make movies. Like, that's what you want to do. Like, what are you doing in school if that's what you want to do? So I love the don't read about fish, go study fish. It's a good analogy because you never learn. School can't teach you what you learn in the real world. It cannot. It will never do it. Right?
It can't. Yeah, you can read a book on football, or you could go to football practice. You're going to learn different things.
Exactly. So I love that phrase, and I'll probably take it. I also love you can't pick the fruit unless you study the root. That's a pretty good little quip there too. So I love them both. Can we go way back into when your dad lost his? So you grew up in an entrepreneurial kind of house, small business advocate, all those things. Everything's chugging along, right? I'm sure when everything's great, you've got the coolest bike and the coolest skateboard in the neighborhood, and then he loses everything. Did you lose your home?
We did, yeah. We lost everything.
And how old were you then?
It took a while for it to grind to a halt. It was about a 6-year period, and there was a lot of legal stuff. But I was a senior in high school when they finally lost the home, and it was about the week I was going off to college. So it was a tough period.
So you're leaving. There's no loss of home for you because you're going away anyway.
There is.
But now you're leaving your folks, and they're struggling to go back to an apartment, I guess. Is that what?
It's true. Yeah. And they had some help from extended family, but what should have been a period of like excitement and joy and forward looking was kind of overshadowed by this sense of doom. Because in business, you have a setback that's normal, or, maybe recession and there's a slowdown. That's typical. We have cycles like that. But to go 0 to 100 back to 0, roughly, it's emotionally, it's very hard to go backwards.
Yes. Very hard to shut the doors, right? Even I see a lot of business owners that are upside down for years and years and years. And there's something, I've done it, right? I've been way upside down for way too many years, right? But you just keep pushing through, and you finally something cracks eventually and gets you through. But you went through that experience and you said, that's what I want to do. I want to put it all in the line and maybe lose it or maybe be great. Like, so how does that mindset shift?
Yeah.
A lot of people go the other way their parents went, right? The opposite direction.
It's true. Yeah. You go 180. If you do the math of it, if you quantitatively analyze, should I start up a business? It's not a good calculation. You're not going to come up with a lot of yeses because, like you said, you have to capital outlay, time, learning skills, building relationships, the luck of having the right timing and being in the right place at the right time. And, I didn't open my restaurant, not that I have a restaurant, when the COVID lockdown happened. That's the luck of timing sometimes. And all the calculation in the world can't figure that out. But so it really eventually comes from passion and from wanting to try something or having an idea of how to build the better mousetrap or the service.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting. So for me, this is a misconception, and I hope you can relate, but I always thought that when you own your own business, you're the boss, right? Because
you're the last employee.
You could do the org chart and you seem to be at the top, but it's not actually true. And especially in a startup, you're the last one to get paid if you get paid. You're serving your customers, your employees, your service providers, everybody. And, at the end of your 16-hour or plus days, in some cases, there might be enough to keep the lights on and, not have to borrow from uncle or aunt or something like that. So
Right.
it's an interesting calculation. What I later learned was what I said, you do make the decisions, but you have to enjoy serving your clients. You have to enjoy your employees and your team that you build. And the ideal, so the goal isn't my initial misconception that you own the business and you're the king or whatever.
Right.
But that would be cool. That'd be great. But it's that you get to do work you love with people you love. That's the holy grail.
Absolutely. I love it. I tell a lot of my staff all the time, like, you think that I'm the boss, but I can't make you come to work, but you sure as hell can make me come into the office.
Yeah.
Right. Like you cannot, if you don't show up for your shift, guess what? I'm calling everybody. And if I can't find anybody to come in and cover, I'm sitting here sometimes at 2:00 in the morning getting a job done because the crew didn't show up for some reason. Right. And COVID made that 10 times more challenging for me, but
yeah,
we got through that.
You get to see all of the worst problems because especially if you have a good team, they handle all the day-to-day stuff. And you're
Right.
not busy with that noise. You're busy with the impossible problems that no one else could solve.
Well, and you're dealing with the nuances of human beings working with you, right? I have found that I really love teams of 10 to 20, right? And above 20, man, I start really just losing it. And I feel like, I've constantly got somebody pulling at a string and the whole thing's falling apart. So I keep my teams 10, preferably 20 at the high side. And I just have pockets of teams everywhere. And that keeps my sanity level pretty calm. But you're dealing with, now you've got the gender and race issues that you're dealing with when everybody's working together, and family issues and mental issues and medical issues. It's nonstop, right? Even with 10 people, it's pretty hectic. So
it's true. And you're right. If you get more than 20 or north of that, you're going to have two teams that are, you're going to have factions or cliques within that, I think.
Which is exhausting.
Not fun.
It's totally exhausting. So I don't like that world. So I've made a conscious decision to keep small pockets of teams and not grow big teams anymore. I used to have this desire to grow these giant, 200 people teams and like lead all of these, people into war. And I'm like, man, that was too exhausting for me. And I'm not playing that game any longer.
True. Yeah, it becomes its whole other objective in itself above the organizational ones.
Yes. So grew up, entrepreneurial spirit, all that stuff, fantastic. Dad's a grinder. Did he go back into business after that? Did he start another business, or did he go to work for the corporate world?
He went back into business with my older brother, back into the construction industry, and they continue today, but it never got to the pinnacle of what it was. And looking back, when it hit its pinnacle was a period maybe like the last couple of years where things were booming, cash was just jamming into the financial system,
right,
and everything seemed to work. And then like a period like now, or what we're getting into, where the economy, I feel like we're crawling through the mud, or we're in a quagmire. It's
a tough time in 22.
Yeah, it's not effortless,
Right.
it seemed to be in some of the previous years.
Right. So I congratulations to your father for taking that hit and then getting back into the game. It's always scary, but it's really scary after you've taken a loss. And I've been fortunate enough never to lose a house, but I've been close. So I definitely know what that head scratcher feels like, right?
Yeah, you've had some of those nights where I don't know how it's going to stay together, right?
Right.
And somehow I picked, the stock market as my playground for business, which is not, no matter what I plan, I'm going to grow at 10 or 12 or whatever percent a year. The stock market doesn't care about my plans. It's incredibly volatile. And so for me, it brings up ghosts of my past of, oh my gosh, we just dropped this amount in this period of time. It feels like the upbringing,
Right. So you after all this stuff, you're a hustler, kind of startups as a kid, cutting grass, lemonade stands, all that fun stuff. Today what is your company today?
So our company is Fizyx LLC, Fizyx Investment Group. And what we do is we manage money in the stock market through privately offered funds. And the way we have a really special niche. I don't think anyone else is doing what we're doing. The skill set I learned from O'Neill and the one I developed was how to find leading stocks early, like the big winners. And our research goes back to the year 1900 for stock market cycles, which is when we can get data on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And every cycle since then, every uptrend produced leading stocks that went up hundreds to thousands of percent or more. And so if that's true, then you back into, okay, how do we discover these things early and maybe build a portfolio just out of these things instead of all 500 S&P stocks or something like that?
Right.
And that's really been my life's work for the last 20 plus years. And it's been really special. And so the epiphany that led to the current offering that we have is if we can find stocks that are growing at exponential rates, like sales growth, earnings growth, and publicly traded stocks. And if we could build a portfolio exclusively out of these, exponential rate being maybe 40% compounded plus on an annual basis, maybe for 5 year or something sustained period. So this ends up looking like Apple after Steve Jobs comes back, or Google as an IPO to, a lot of these. And in the rearview mirror, these are all obvious, but there's just dozens and dozens that they're not obvious when to buy them. They're obvious when they should be sold typically.
Right.
So by building a portfolio just out of these stocks, and some of them are growing at 100% plus per year. So we could get a portfolio to do the exact same thing. And so that's what we're working on.
Okay. So is that a stockbroker then?
It's
or
actually
a fund manager.
Similar to, it's a fund. It's a privately offered
Okay.
fund, similar to a hedge fund or something like that.
Okay. So, and that's Fizyx, and you started that 22 years ago.
Yes. So Fizyx has been around for 6 years. This is the reiteration that I did after a lot of research and looking at some of those things for O'Neill that worked for him that weren't working the same for me. And I just said, wait a minute, why can't we get it to do, what I thought I would do on day one when we went into business?
Okay. So you're picking, your goal is to pick the winners for a private fund. Yeah. What kind of investors are you looking for that fund?
So it's typically high net worth investors. It's we have a lot of professionals and business owners. The other thing I do, and because O'Neill did this and he didn't have to, but I realize the benefit to him. I teach a lot of people how to invest. And then we do that through seminars and other things, sometimes letters or videos we put out. But and some of that is like very important nuance of market timing, which is, we don't want to be buying stocks maybe today in this current environment where we think maybe a lot of individuals are selling stocks and liquidating because they have inflation issues they're dealing with or such. But there's a time when this part of the cycle ends and we go back into a growth phase of the cycle. And that's really when we want to be more aggressive and more taking the risks that'll get those rewards. Right.
So today I don't know the exact date this show is going to air, but we're June of 22, roughly, early July, late June. And the stock market is not the greatest at this moment, right? What I'm doing is just dollar cost averaging now, just small purchases on a regular basis on the big guys, right? Is that the right approach in these down market worlds?
Yeah, that's an excellent approach. So there's really only a couple strategies that work long term, and one of the best ones, and I think this is great for most people. This is how I would have like my children start off, is looking at index funds, dollar cost averaging, which means every month putting in roughly the same amount. And what that does during a period like this, where we're in a bear market and maybe we're 4 or 5 days off the bottom, but that doesn't really yet resonate into an uptrend. It's a little too early. But what that does is that lowers your cost during these periods, and it really averages out the odds for you.
Very long term. Yeah. So I like that for all things. I'm pretty deep into the crypto world as well. I've taken my wounds in that bucket by far. But I look at now, I'm looking at these next 2 or 3 years as an opportunity to collect assets, right? If you can maintain employment, you can get these assets in. I think it's a really great time to build wealth in this current downturn, because it's going to come back around, right? It
Absolutely.
always has, it will again, right? That's the faith that we can have. So you're looking for high net worth investors. Is there a minimum cap to come into your fund, or is that something you could talk about publicly?
It's typically our investors are 400,000 plus. We have some lower, and then we have some a bit higher, but
and that's their total asset bucket.
That's their asset bucket with us.
Okay.
So they may have others, and typically they do have other strategies. Many of them use a strategy like what you said is a core strategy,
Right.
And they would use us as like a aggressive growth strategy.
Absolutely.
I'll say so. What we've been able to do for people, and not just in Fizyx, but in the previous companies that I ran that were images of this, is compounding at around 30 to 32% per year, net of all the costs and everything. So it's been, and if the market lately has been doing 12%, or it depends on your time frame, but we've been doing quite well compared to the S&P.
Okay, wonderful. So you compare yourself to the S&P. That's the Standard & Poor's, right?
It kind of, everyone else does, so it's kind of the common mark. And I would say, more often our stocks tend to be NASDAQ listed than NYSE, but our latest big one was Tesla, which we bought back in October of 19, and at the peak it was up 2,400%.
Nice.
It's still up quite a bit, but
yeah,
it doesn't take a lot of those cycles to really move the needle.
Right. Absolutely. One good pick can change the entire game. So you're more on the tech side of investing.
You know what? That's where the action has been. And it's interesting. You haven't seen biotech or anything, and there's been some great innovations there. But Moderna was a big winner for us, which wasn't too hard to figure out, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, there was a couple of horses to bet on in that arena, right? When COVID was hitting. So and picking the right horse, or picking all the horses, is another great way to win, right?
Yeah,
Just bet on all of them.
2020 was a fascinating year because we, at least for us, we started off very strong, and then we saw what was going on when flights got canceled, and the obvious ripple effects were going to be, airlines, hotels, restaurants, are industry-wise are in recession, like immediately, like flipped a switch. In some ways, that was very unprecedented. And so you had this correction, and then you just had, with the CARES Act, all the financial stuff, the payment protection, paycheck protection program, and all the quantitative easing. Interest rates went to nothing. Bizarre world. But in the wake of that, human behavior really changed. And you saw Peloton and Zoom and DocuSign and all these remote working things, Shopify. They really reflected the change in human behavior. And that was a year that really, to take advantage of that, constant repositioning was required. Right.
Which is exhausting for me, right? That's why I've decided I'm not ever going to try to pick stocks again and work that Forex stuff. I'm just going to buy and hold, and that's my strategy moving forward.
You can't dabble in it and like kind of watch it out of the corner of your eye. It doesn't quite work like that. So I think your approach again is a very wise one.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've been flowed through that world my entire existence trying to figure it out. But all right. So now you're talking about, a lot of people in the audience can't even comprehend having $400,000 in total assets, right? So, and you're talking about not only having it, but putting it on the table on a bet, right? That takes a specific kind of mindset to do that, right? And we talked a little bit before the show, and you said you're big into mindset. And one thing that I've learned is that everybody that's running at a level that people are at least looking up to or getting noticed, mindset is a significant part of their daily work, right?
Sure.
I'm currently working on forgiveness, right? So what is your current mindset, things that you're working on?
Forgiveness is difficult.
Well, it's a big one.
The more important it is, the more difficult it is, right?
It's a huge one, though. And I didn't even recognize how large it was until I really got into that practice. And I've been working on it for a few months now. But,
It's, we think of mindset as, you could pick up a book and find a good idea and make it yours, and therefore you have the mindset. But really, for me, there's like default mindset. What's running through my head when I wake up before I have to consciously think about what's running through my head and tame it down a little bit. One of the ones for me that's a real struggle, and especially so the market's in a downtrend. We don't have opportunity to make money with our method here, so we're kind of stalking and waiting for that next opportunity, the next cycle. But if like Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, there's this great example. It's first or second or third lesson about how every adversity brings with it the seeds of opportunity. And that's one that I wish was a default one, but it's not. I have to work on that. Oh yeah, this is really good. I just, I fell out of bed and doesn't feel like a good thing, but there's some opportunity there. So that is the crux of it though, because if you struggle, which you will, business or not, if you have a goal, if you're going through a career, you're going through your education, if you struggle, you're in a class with a tough teacher or whatever it is, often persisting through that makes you a lot better than you thought you would be. And you can't see it in the moment. You can only see it, right after that moment's over and the weight's off your shoulders, so to speak. So that's something for me that's hard. And it's something I should have learned from my upbringing, maybe, but it's not a default automatic mindset.
Right. I read the first page of Napoleon Dynamite's Think and Grow Rich every day. Desire is the starting point for all achievement. I read it's literally that book is sitting there. But my favorite story in that book, and I've fell victim to it so many times in my life, is the 3 Feet from Gold.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah.
Right. Like you just never know where you're at. If the work that you're doing feels good and it's rewarding to you, even if the money's not there or everybody in the world is telling you why don't you just file bankruptcy and walk away from this thing? Right. But you never know what that next day is going to bring or that next strike is going to bring. And, I just recommend reading the book, and not just reading the book, Napoleon Dynamite, Think and Grow Rich, studying the book, reading it over and over and over. I try to read it at least once a year, and I read that first page every single day of my life.
Yeah. That was my first book every New Year's for years. And I got away from it a little bit because it was just kind of like watching a rerun at some point. But another one, Jim Collins is another great business author. He was a business professor at Stanford. Mm-hmm. And he talks about what happens when companies encounter luck. Unpredictable, unexpected, either upside or downside events. But he talks about that personally too. And one of the best kinds of luck is, he calls it people luck. You just randomly meet someone who becomes a spouse or a best friend or a colleague, a mentor, or someone who you mentor, and that can, like you said, you can't see that might happen next day. And the 3 Feet from Gold story, I think he pulls it forward into an insurance career where he's just persists past rejection to close a lot of sales. And so you can't tell. We think we can predict enough things, but those chance events, look for people luck in your life, you'll find it.
Yeah. And I'm currently running into some issues in my own life on self-sabotage and stuff like that. As you level up, you get to you got to convince yourself that, no, I'm capable of doing this work. And because I've done all this other work, right? There's clues that left you to the point that give you the confidence to do that next job. Right. But it's scary when you're going into a new realm of something you've never done before, right? Taking a large amount of money and putting it on the table and hoping that you're right, that there's a return, but you never know when a pandemic's going to hit. Right.
Right.
And every McDonald's in the country shuts down for 3 months.
Right. It should have been a lock, buying McDonald's, but then that happened. But what you just said is so good, because it's when you level up, you think, okay, yeah, there's more in the bank account, and there's more, finally the income exceeds the outflow and all this. But the thing, I think one thing you said to me before is, you don't start thinking about mindset when you start a company or something. That's not the first thing you think about. But when you level up, you eventually realize your mindset needs to level up too, and it needs to catch up with where you're at. And often if it doesn't, you go back a level.
Well, I think you can stay at that level wherever you're at for a very, very long time. And if you're comfortable there, stay there, right? It's okay. I wasn't comfortable living the life that I was living. So I think I had to start making some changes, right? And that was, challenging for everybody in my life. Challenging for me, challenging for my wife, challenging for my kids, right? It wasn't an easy battle to get through. So, because you got to dig up everything in your past. Everything from your past has to be put out on the table. Everybody needs to know everything in your current life of what happened to you in the past and how you're moving forward and what your goals are. And you have to be able to set goals, which was really hard for me for a very, very long time. I'm like, I don't want to set goals. I just want to live this life and enjoy it and all that other stuff. But if you don't have those goals, then you're just you'll just stay where you're at.
Yeah, it's true. Like Jim Rohn, he said, a well-defined goal. It's not just the direction you're going. It's the thing that'll pull you through a really hard time.
Right.
And you wake up in the morning and you don't want to get out of bed, but that well-defined goal is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have, so I've done almost every, the woohoo magic stuff that you can think of, right? I've done hypnotism. I'm super lucky to have the adversity that I've had because I've been in therapy since the age of 7, right? So mental health has been something that I've been working on almost my entire existence, right? So going to those kinds of things has just been common for me whenever I hit a hurdle in life. I'm like, oh, I can go see somebody and they'll help me through this. You've talked about a couple of mentors that you had in life. Do you also have coaches or things like that you lean on?
I do. I work very closely with my wife, who's a psychological sounding board for me.
Right.
And I do have a counselor I see. For me, that's very important because, as I mentioned, the things I went through in my upbringing, which I think I experienced as a child or childlike, teenager, still a child. And I still, when they come back to me, I still see them at that less mature level. But there's a couple of things. One is whatever you do in life, and especially if you push hard, if you're driven, if you're passionate, whoever you are, whatever your strengths and weaknesses, they will be revealed. And this is a good thing. This is authentic. This is, the people around you should know who you are legitimately. You shouldn't keep it buried. But it goes back to the mindset and the leveling up. We don't want to keep dealing with things. I don't want to deal with it the way I did when I was 16 or 18. It's not appropriate today. Now I have 16-year-old and an 18-year-old and a few others.
Right.
It's their job to operate at that level. I need to operate at a higher level, especially managing people, managing money, and trying to deal with the stock market.
Right. I forget exactly how you phrased it, but the people around you need to know who you are, right? Is so important. I know when I was struggling, I took a huge hit in 2016, giant hit. I lost my mentor. The coal industry kind of collapsed, and that was a big, gigantic piece of my business. And I remember my wife telling me at one point, she's like, I don't know which Kenny I'm going to get when you come home today. Right. And that was like a gigantic awakening, right? Like, oh shit, I'm literally bringing different pieces of me home every day and nobody knows what to expect. And if they don't know what to expect, they're definitely not going to follow you into war when you need to go into war. Right. And you need those people with you to fight the battles that you're going to have. It's
so true. And even if you're in a period like that of crisis and you come home optimistic, and everyone else is like, how can you be optimistic? I thought it was terrible yesterday.
Right. But you have to be, or you'll just quit or die. Right. Like, I don't know what would happen if I just let that eat at me nonstop.
And so what you have to bring home, though, isn't fake. But it can't be raw and unprocessed.
Yes.
And that's hard. That's hard emotional and psychological work. It is.
Right. Do you have any tips or tricks to help somebody that doesn't have, they haven't thought about mindset, they're in business or they're trading with you, right? They're one of your, and they just took a big hit, right? And this is maybe the first significant hit that they've taken in their life, right? A financial significant hit where they're really scratching their head like, man, I might have some real loss here. What are some of the things that you can start telling that person to do almost immediately to start that process of mindset and working on it on a regular basis?
Yeah. So in trading in the markets, there's one thing in particular. Rule number one is stop. Get to cash if that's where you need to be, or get very lightly invested. Stop what you're doing, back up, and let the emotional dust settle a little bit, because most of the mistakes aren't logical, they're emotional. And I think that's true. It's really true in relationships. It's true in business. It's true in partnerships. All of it. It's,
right.
You can't math your way out of a lot of it, which is terrible because I'm great at math. I'm not as good at the other
right.
part. But yeah, I think thing one is to get clarity. So back away, calm down, because the main job is to figure out what went wrong and fix it or tweak it or find another approach. But you can't do that when you're riled up and you're fired up. Two is to build as much as you possibly can. Surround yourself with people that their strengths fill in your weaknesses, and some of that's psychological, some of it's skills and talents.
Right.
And I think it is really important to have a diverse team, and in every way that means people that think differently, people that have different philosophies. But the thing that shouldn't be diverse is the commonality, the common goal, that everyone buys into the vision and the culture and the strategy.
Right.
It's the one point where you don't want too much diversity. But I think, and a team can just be one or two or three people. A great team, you said, often is smaller. You move a lot faster. Communication velocity is so high. But as you grow, everything grows.
Yeah, new level, new devil all the time.
Yeah,
so
that's a great one.
Yeah, I like to do one of the things that I developed for myself was a list of 13 core values, and I read those core values to myself. And there's stuff like don't talk about it, be about it, don't make excuses, be authentic, like these 13 things, and I read them out loud to myself every single day. Right, every single day I read these core values that I have that make me the person that I am. And if I can say them really loud and boisterous with a lot of passion, I do. I can't pull that energy every day, but I do get through them every single day. And I think that helps me know the kind of person that I want to be. And if I continue telling myself that every single day, then I get closer to those core values every single day, right? That I read those. So that's been huge. Also, on building your team, folks, they don't have to know that they're on your team. Right. You don't have to pay Tony Robbins to watch him on YouTube, or Gary Vee, or any of these guys, right? You've got a ton of books. You've got a ton of YouTube content all out there. I've got no problem going to the bar and sitting down and just striking up a conversation with the guy next to me. And you'd be surprised at how much they'll let go just talking to a stranger. And, your team isn't just the people in your office that day or the people in your house that night. Utilize the entire planet as part of your team, and I think you'll see some things open up for you if you just make that mentality change as well.
That's excellent. I like that. When you start out, whatever your endeavor is, again, whether it's education or business or career, there's a lot of hesitation. There's a lot of potential causes for hesitation, and sometimes there are excuses. But like you said, there's so many resources here. There's so many millionaires and billionaires who wrote down how they did what they did. And not that it's all about money. There's emotional, and there's everything else. There's Brene Brown. There's all these great people who in detail gave their honest best, and it's out there if you want it.
Right.
And so if it's out there and if you want it and you don't reach for it, you might not want it.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to. It's
and just be honest with yourself. If you don't want it, that's fine, right? I look at the way I look at this game is like a football field, right? And there's a giant party on both end zones, and they're both great. You're sitting at this, I'm an employee, I'm over here. This is a great party, right? It's fun. I get to watch Netflix at night. I go to the bar with my friends. I get to hang out, and as I make it to the 10-yard line, it's still a fun party, but there's less people there, right? As I get through and about that 50-yard line, and it feels really lonely. And I got to decide, am I going to go back to that party? I'm going to keep going to this better party that's in front of me, right? And it gets lonely through some of those 10-yard runs, right? Is there's nobody there.
Right. It is lonely in there. And people are transitioning through, but they're not living there.
Right. But you can find, at every kind of step, you find people that you can correlate with and bond with and help you get to that next level. So you have to love running through that field, right? And looking at both parties and going, which one am I going to go to, right? Am I going to go back to that one that I know and it's comfortable? That's the easier one to get to. But there's a whole lot of hurdles in front of you.
Yeah, that's great. There are, and this is another Jim Rohn. People tend to do well because of inspiration or desperation. Okay, but
yes,
either you have.
I read that in your profile. Yeah,
yeah. However, in the middle of those, kind of like the 50-yard line is comfort. It's a 6-pack of beer and an Xbox on the couch.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, that Xbox only cost me $500 or $600 or something. No, it's costing you $20,000 a year, at least.
If you're playing it 2 hours a night and you're not working on a sales process, a sales funnel, build a new page, looking for somebody, looking for a way to grow your business, or looking for that next. I've been a huge fan of connections recently, right? These weird connections that you can make at the bar or at the airport or wherever you're at, just meeting these amazing people. It's few and far between, but when they happen, it absolutely feels like a lightning strike whenever you can create that great connection with somebody.
That's so true. It's, when you start out a business, or if you start with like nothing, like capital constrained, and I was working at fast food when I was starting an operation at one point. You can't see it at the time. Again, it's hard to see when you're in the middle of that battle and the bullets are whizzing by. But the most important things you have are mindset, their ideas, and their network. Those are worth their weight in gold. Absolutely. And if I had started with an extra 1,000 or 5,000 or however many dollars, it wouldn't be nearly as valuable as starting with the right mentor or the right team, or just happening to have the right conversation at that bar.
Right. Absolutely. And that last thing I think you really need is at least a little bit of a delusional bubble that you can do it, right? That you can do, that you're not going to fail, that no matter what, you're going to keep chugging down this boat. And if for a second you think you're going to fail, it's already over.
Yeah, it's true. It's, you have to be somewhat unrealistic. And you also have to believe that the growth isn't like an option. It's something you have to do. It's like grow or die.
Oh, yes.
Otherwise, you're just going to keep whether if you're a baker and you don't learn a better recipe, you're not going to have a better bakery.
No, you're not. You're going to stay the same over time. And then somebody is going to crush you down the road, right? And you can have a long run, right? I got super lucky. I was in, I left the entertainment industry in 99 and went into the IT field. Couldn't have been a better time, right? I'm still living on my dividends from the sales that I made in 1999 going into 2000, right? They've carried me for over 20 years, right? That's awesome. So that you got to have one good win and it can carry you for 20 something plus years. So just keep trying. Got to keep getting yourself out there.
And you got to plant a lot of seeds. And right. They're not all going to come up. A lot of them won't, but it just takes one or two really good ones.
Yeah. So how do you deal with the ones that never bloom?
That's a good question. So like in terms of how I invest in our investment strategy, and this is a metaphor for other things as well. When we buy a stock and say we buy it at $100 per share, we're looking to make it at least 20%. It should at least go to 120 per share.
Right.
And if we're wrong and it goes down 7% to 93 per share, we're always out. And so whatever you're doing, you kind of have to define your profit versus loss, at least at your minimum. and in this case, it's roughly a 3-to-1 profit to loss ratio. So we don't even have to be right half the time to get out ahead. As long as it's kind of our way of saying, okay, this big casino of a stock market, we want to be the house, so we're going to set the odds,
Right.
and design it that way. And there's more to it than that, but that's a basic idea.
Right.
So in business, especially small business, you're really running a laboratory, and you're doing a lot of experiments, and you're going to hire somebody, and that's a test, and that's an experiment. You're going to measure it and see how it works, and you're going to start a division or design a product, and how much you're going to risk versus what's the potential reward. And that's really how you look at it. And again, going back to what we just said, though, some of these are they're 100 to 0. It's not 3-to-1. So developing a network, there's absolutely no possible downside to going and having a conversation with someone, other than maybe that initial discomfort if you're uncomfortable or something. There's no downside to working on mindset, developing skills, talents, all that stuff.
Right. It costs you nothing to put your hand out and say, "Hi, my name is Ken. What do you do for a living?"
Right. And
Costs you nothing at all.
even if-
And the opportunities that come are gigantic.
They are. And even if you make a fool of yourself, or you're nervous or whatever it is, you've practiced, and the next couple of times you'll get better.
Absolutely.
I did that when I met my mentor, Bill O'Neill. I went up to him, and I probably a little uncomfortable for him. I was in a men's room. I said, "Mr. O'Neill, I really like what you did." And we had a conversation that evolved into a relationship that was life-changing, and not just for me, but for thousands of people that have been affected by our investment performance. And he had a lot of other people he did that for and with. So the cost of not doing that, let's look at the cost of not doing that.
It's everything.
Yeah. The word, like the haunting word, should be same. Things will be the same if you don't get a little uncomfortable.
Right. If it does not challenge you, it will not change you.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And if you're not looking for change, great. If you're happy doing what you're doing, stay in that lane. Absolutely. I applaud the heck out of you if that's who you are. But if you want to break out and do something different, you're going to have to get uncomfortable, right?
You do, especially that, like, not just incremental change, but that transformational, evolutionary change. It requires building new muscles and new relationships and new skills.
Right. I tell my students all the time, every single day, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the only place that you're allowed to be comfortable, is in uncomfortable situations, right? And continue to put yourself there, because that's what's going to take to be where you want to get in life. If what you're telling me is true, this is where you want to be. You want to be great. You want to be a champion. All these things.
Right.
You have to be really comfortable being uncomfortable, and failure has to be your best friend.
It does.
Yes.
And failure is an illusion. Like, you only fail if you don't get back up once you're knocked down. That is failure.
Correct. Yep.
Getting back up, brushing yourself off, learning the lesson, and trying to learning the lesson is important. Don't forget that.
Joel, if somebody wanted to work with you and they're in that financial bucket where they would fit, how would they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Our website is fizyx.com. That's FIZYX.com. And there's a lot of content there that goes into mindset and how we apply that towards the stock market, and in some ways that are really unique. And the other thing, you could email at info@fizyx.com.
Okay, and we'll throw all that contact information up at the bottom of the screen. We'll put it in the comments and all of that fun stuff. Do you have any current books that you're reading that are new to you?
Jim Collins is an author who I go back to, and he had a book, Beyond Entrepreneurship, and he just did a 2.0, and he's got some really good video content.
Okay.
And I'd say that's one I'm really interested in. Robert Greene's book, Mastery. So I just read this, and by read, I mean Audible, and I read about 10% of it. But I think I realized that where I thought I had mastery in some levels, I didn't yet. And that's actually an advantage. That, okay, it's not that I can't do some things I'm trying to do. I just don't have it yet.
Okay, yeah, not yet.
Not yet.
Yes.
It's a
So
different
you
mindset.
remove the words like try and can't with will and yet.
Yes.
Right. I can't do that yet. Right. So that's a fantastic mindset. Joel, thank you for your time today. I've had a blast talking with you, and I hope that we get to spend some time together again in the future. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we go?
No, thank you, Ken. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I think the one thing I would say is no matter what your challenges are, where you're at or where you're trying to go, there's a lot of people who've probably done a version of it, and go out there and look and go give it a shot. You lose nothing by trying.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, the number is 314-370-2871. All you have to do to join that text line is send me any question about business or technology. I'll do all the research, and I'll give you an absolutely free, totally unbiased answer. Get to work.